Guy quit his job thinking he became rich. Hey new to Reddit, I thought I would post my story here. I work for a construction company and we do remodeling on homes. We have a rule here that we get to keep anything we find hidden behind the walls. We hired this guy. We really needed a worker badly, who was a total a-hole from day one. I've been working for this company for 5 years and this guy has only been doing construction for 1 year after he got fired from his accounting job for getting a DUI. Anyways, he would always make fun of my clothes and my accent, and one day he went too far by telling my boss about my private Instagram account pics. He got on my phone and looked through my Instagram page and showed my boss pictures of me smoking weed. Little did he know that my boss is my friend from 8 years when we used to smoke together before we both quit. I was so mad that he violated my privacy, then I made a plan to duck him over. He was the kind of guy who would always come in late and complain that trains or traffic is why he was always late. One day I overheard him saying that if he won the lottery he would quit this job for not getting the respect he deserves. You have to earn your respect here. One day I bought some fake gold coins online and I put them in a metal box I found at the antique store and waited for a chance to hide it in a wall. Luckily I did not have to wait long. The day he found the coins it seemed like it was his best day ever. First thing he did when he opened the box, he called my boss a effing loser and he quit immediately on the spot. He said F this place, I'm rich, lol. Little did he know that was the best day of my life. After he quit my boss told us that he was going to fire him anyways for always showing up late. I wish I could see the look on his face when he finds out the gold coins are fake. Best $40 I spent in my life. I apologize for my grammar. This just happened today and my adrenaline is pumping hard. Thanks for reading. Edit. These houses are bought at auction. People don't live here so everything is owned by the construction company. My manager was an awful person to me, but I got her fired in an embarrassing fashion. Years ago, shortly after I graduated high school I got a new job to support myself during college. The new gig was in a pet store and I was working in the department that sold the fish, aquariums, reptiles and birds, etc. etc. The store manager was an awesome guy who I will call Kurt. Kurt was an old school guy. He went to work, worked hard and went home. That's all he expected out of you as well. My immediate manager of my department was this large snaggletooth witch of a woman, I'll call her Stephanie. We got off to a bad start because she quickly found out that I knew more about reptiles than her. She preferred the fish, whereas I had kept snakes for the past 4-5 years. Her ego couldn't handle a fresh employee not needing her guidance. From then on she was terrible to me. She singled me out to clean the goldfish tanks, and had the other employees cover sales every day I worked. She would say rude things to me such as, "You are the weak link in my team. You are the reason I'm having problems in this department." Fast forward about a year, my hours had been cut by about 25%. I asked the store manager what the deal was and he told me that our department had lost too much money between lack of sales and broken merchandise etc. This puzzled me, but I didn't think much of it because everybody's hours were cut. Simultaneously myself and a few co-workers had noticed something strange. Stephanie had recently taken much more interest in the customers. She insisted on helping certain customers and sending us to do busy work while they were there. A customer came in one evening and was talking to us about how nice Stephanie is. Turns out Stephanie was breeding mice and selling them to customers outside of the store. We found out she was breeding all of her animals, her dogs, turtles, mice, and selling them to customers she met through our store. Not only was this taking business from us, our store had a couple corporate policies. We did not feed nor sell mice as live food for snakes, and we donated a lot of time and money to shelters, and we condemned breeding dogs and cats for sales. Stephanie was making money by selling animals to the customers all the while her department had hours cut for all of its employees. It didn't quite make sense how this was costing us so much money until one evening I thought I had figured it out. Stephanie was an otherwise lazy woman, but when one of her customers came in she was by their side the whole time. I watched closely as she followed a customer around helping them pick out a cart full of expensive aquarium decorations and terrarium supplies like lights and bulbs. I followed and wrote down every item she grabbed. I wanted to see where this went. She directed the customer to register and went to check them out. She's lazy and would never do this for any other customers. I noted the time and went back to work. I later spoke to other cashiers about Stephanie checking customers out, and they said that she only ever rang up certain customers and she acted weird when they did it. They suspected she was abusing coupons for them or applying hefty discounts. I got my co-workers to corroborate my story about the under-the-table animal sales and suspicious behavior, and I went to talk to Kurt. I handed him a paper with about 20 UCs and the time written on it, and I said, I think if you look up a transaction from register to at this time last night, you will find a large discount applied to it. These are the items I would expect you to find on that transaction. He was a bit puzzled and I explained everything to him. I told him I didn't want to make any accusations before because I wasn't sure, but after seeing her in action I was pretty sure something was going on. He thanked me and assured me he would look into it. A couple weeks later I was at work and I noticed Kurt was standing near the door watching closely. It just so happened Stephanie was coming in for her shift right about that time. The second she walked through the door he called her over to his office. Apparently waiting in his office was a regional manager from corporate. He looked at the list I gave him and looked up transactions from the night before. He found one at the exact time I wrote, but it only had about half of the items I listed. But every item that was on the receipt was on the list I gave him. This prompted him to watch her for a few weeks, and in that time frame they found her to be taking her customers around shopping, personally taking them up to the register and scanning every other item and putting the expensive stuff into the cart without ringing it up. In that time span she had given away over $1,500 in merchandise, and he looked back at the logs we keep for broken merchandise that is written off and found an excessive amount of aquarium supplies and decorations that were signed off by her. It was something like 1000% more written off broken merchandise than was found at the same time last quarter. All in all, she was charged with stealing, defrauding the store in over $3,500 in merchandise. And it just so happened that Kurt had already arranged for police to meet them after firing her to escort her out. I don't know if she went to jail, but I did watch her get walked out by police with about 20 employees staring. I wish I could have said something, but I had to settle for her making eye contact with me as she walked out, to which I gave her a quick wink. Edit. A word. Edit 2. TL. Dr. Manager was an insufferable cunt. I found out she was doing shady shit. I investigated and documented it. She was fired and escorted out by police. Evil stepfather gets what he deserves. TLDR at the bottom. I made a comment on another post. Got way more upvotes and comments than expected. And you Alex28-3 and you Drake1 suggested I tell a more in-depth version of the story here. When I was 15. My mom started dating a man she met on a dating website. I didn't like him the first time I met him, and 2 months later he moved into the house. About 3 weeks after he moved in, he took my skateboards, self-built half pipe, ramps, BMX bike, ice hockey gear, and many other things to the dump one day while I was at school. He said he did this because he didn't want all of my crap cluttering up his garage. Maybe 2 months later he punched me in the stomach for the first time because I got up from the dinner table without asking to be excused. From there it escalated into full-fledged beatdowns for the smallest perceived slight to his authority. One day he decided to take my extensive Pokemon card collection, even more extensive comic book collection, my Game Boy and PS2 with all the assorted games, and my fantasy and sci-fi book collection, and got rid of it all because 15-year-old boy should be playing football and baseball, not being a far-out nerd playing with Pokemon cards and reading comics and books. I would like to add that he was a middle school teacher, and in his off time refereed and umpired local middle and high school sports games. My mom never intervened, and in fact acquiesced when he demanded that she stop giving me lunch money, because the little it will just spend it on comics and other games. One day, I took maybe $3 and change out of his change jar so that I could buy a slice of pizza and some fruit punch during lunch at school. Because I was tired of being hungry. My twin sister was always a bit of an asshole, and frequently blackmailed me into doing her chores from a young age. I was fed up and refused to do something, so she told him what I had done. This man actually called the police and pressed a larceny charge against me, and once the police had left, proceeded to beat me senseless. At that point I ran away. When the cops found me and returned me to my home, I found out that he had been trying to talk my mom into sending me away to military school or something of that nature. I ran away again. and between having run away several times and the larceny charge ended up turning 16 in juvenile detention. I spent the next couple years miserable and afraid, frequently contemplating suicide. Once I was out on my own. I didn't speak to my mom for several years. We eventually reconciled, and by that point they had married. I was a lot bigger than I had been as a young teenager, and had gotten into weightlifting, so he no longer acted like he was going to punch me to make me flinch, much less actually hit me, and we basically avoided each other for the most part. My mother found out that she had stage 4 cancer, and no longer wanted to waste any of the time she had left with him. So she had a lawyer draft up a separation agreement whereby he would receive a set amount of money upon separation, and would have 45 days to retrieve his belongings from the house. He had spent his entire inheritance in 6 months and then had to sell his mother's house that he grew up in order to settle his debts shortly before they started dating, and my mother bought the house back from the bank before they married. She allowed him to keep the house and he moved back into his mother's house. My mother passed away about 9 months after their separation, and despite the agreement had been allowing him to come and get his stuff piecemeal, I put an immediate end to that. He was past the deadline to remove his personal effects and they were now legally mine to dispose of as I saw fit. I sold his baseball card collection, around $14k, and his autographed sports memorabilia, roughly $11k, and also sold all of his woodworking equipment, along with several finished pieces of furniture that he had made, $6,500 I think. I kept his mother's engagement ring, platinum band 3 diamonds roughly 2 carats, wedding band, his coin collection. I also collect coins, and some tools and other odds and ends. Now comes the real fun. Around a month ago I finally saw him at the grocery store. As he was leaving I approached him. I told him I had sold his collections as he was pushing his cart out towards his car. He reacted exactly as I expected. He took a swing at me multiple times. I already had my phone ready to dial 911. Several of these punches missed and the ones that did connect didn't have much effect because he's nowhere near as strong as he was 20 years ago in his 40s. And I no longer a skinny little 15-year-old. He continued to try to punch me as I spoke to the 911 operator, and was actively ramming his grocery cart into my new Toyota as the police officers pulled into the parking lot. He was arrested for assault, communicating threats, and destruction of property. As a result he lost his job and pension at the local middle school. And because he had never learned how to save money while married to my somewhat wealthy mother, ended up having to sell his mother's house because he hired an expensive lawyer thinking he could somehow beat the charges. My nephew, who was on the football team, made it well known to his friends that he not only had just been arrested and convicted of assault as well as other charges, but that he had also beat me as a child, causing several parents to call for him to resign from refereeing and umpiring for local sports games. My niece and my girlfriend's much younger sister are enrolled at the middle school where he worked, and say that he was not only universally disliked, but when he came up to the school to get his belongings, he made a big scene and ended up hysterically crying as he was leaving. At least that's what they've heard from the kids who were attending summer school at the time. His son, who he was equally abusive towards as a child, refused to take him in or help him out, so the abusive stepfather ended up having to take a job as a cashier at Walmart so that he could afford the rent on his crappy little trailer in an absolutely awful neighborhood. Even though that Walmart is not the closest Walmart to my house, that is now the only place where I go grocery shopping or to purchase anything that I need. I purposely stand in line longer than I need to just so that he can be the one who has the pleasure of ringing up my purchases. The first time I went through his line he attempted to ring up multiple items more than one time to overcharge me, and when I called him on it, he said that I was mistaken. I asked for a manager, and the manager believed him that it was an accident, but he learned that he can't get away with that. The second time, I made sure to be as nice as possible and had to ask for a manager because he was overwhelmingly rude. The people in line behind me backed me up and he got in some trouble for that. Every time I go there and step into line, I see him die a little bit inside, and it gives me such satisfaction. Sometimes I'll say that I'm paying with exact change, and as I'm about to hand him the money I'll say, "Oh, I didn't realize I had rare coin from his collection in my pocket. I guess I'll use my credit card." I just sold his expensive ratcheting wrench set, and so on Monday when he works again I'm going to go buy my daughter one of their better above ground pools. And as he's ringing it out tell him I know that daughter is just going to love this pool. It's not like I would have ever used those expensive ratcheting wrenches anyway. TLDR, asshole stepfather got rid of all of my prized possessions as a child and beat the crap out of me regularly. I ended up getting all of his prized possessions and selling most of them. And when I told him he tried to assault me in public, which resulted in criminal charges, losing his job, and his house. Now I get to see him all the time and rub his nose in it. Edit. For clarity and a couple of typos. Was bored at work, so got a guy fired and possibly sent to prison for fraud. I work the night shift as a receptionist at a hotel in Norway, and most nights are spent watching Netflix playing games. Last summer was really slow and I also worked a lot extra, so I ran out of stuff to watch and games to play. One night I got a mail from Scooter. He wanted to book a room for almost 20 days. I just had to send him the price and confirmation that we had rooms available, and he would then send me his credit card info for me to pre-charge. Normally we just delete these kinds of mail, but I was bored out of my mind. So I responded with an offer for around $2,000 for the entire stay. Also made sure to inform him that he could cancel for free up until the day of arrival. This is probably the most common fraud attempt in the hotel travel industry. Unlike most businesses, we are able to charge credit debit cards with only the card number and EXP date. No need for a PIN code, CVC or other auth methods. Our software also allows us to deposit money directly to local and international bank accounts by using the card number. Because of this, it heads like Scooter will try to prepay with stolen skimmed cards, but then cancel the booking and asking us to refund the amount to a different card. A couple of hours after sending him the offer, he responded with a Visa number and told me to charge him as soon as possible. I checked the card with our validation software, and to my big surprise it did not belong to Scooter. If validation succeeds, it will return with the card owner's name 90% of the time. I sent him a new mail stating that the card was declined because of insufficient funds. He quickly replied and gave me a new card to try. Guess what? This one didn't belong to Scooter either. Wasn't even the same person as the first card. By checking the BIN codes, 6 first digits, I found which banks had issued the cards. Not even issued in the same country. My plan was to just call the banks and inform them of the attempted scam, but there were still several hours before I could go home. So I decided to duck with Scooter a bit more. Sent him a reply that the second card went through, and also the reference number for his stay at our hotel. As expected, a couple hours later Scooter sent a mail cancelling the order and asked if we could refund the money to a different card, as he had lost his wallet and deactivated the card he paid with. This card was issued from a Polish bank. Not sure why, but Polish bank accounts are often used by people who want to launder money from bitcoins and drugs. You can buy a legit card for around $500 that is registered to some guy girl in Poland from Darknet. At this point, Scooter were probably pretty happy about the $2,000 he soon would receive. I replied that it was no problem for me to transfer the $sign to a different card, as long as it was valid. How fun would it be to also cancel his own card, so that he had to spend $500 for a new one? Not fun enough. In the last mail I wrote that he could send me the card number, but that our email server would go down for maintenance in a few minutes, so my boss would do it on Monday. It was now Saturday morning, so enough time for the charge bank to call us and reverse the transfer if he needed the money right away. I told him to call the hotel before I ended my shift at 7 o'clock. He called almost immediately, and I wrote down the card number and his phone number. Told him I transferred the money, and that it would be in his account by 12 o'clock. My shift ended, and I went home with all the info Scooter had provided. Wanted to see if I could find out who he was, and OFC this idiot had an open Facebook profile that I found using his phone number. He even listed his address and employer. Looked a bit like the artist Scooter, but with even more ducked up face and spiky hair full of gel. He lives somewhere outside of London, in an area I would describe as a British trailer park. Houses that were nice at some point, but where the owners had spent £0 on maintenance since it was built. Thrash everywhere, and broken windows that were boarded up or fixed by sealing holes with garbage. Now to the fun part. According to his FB profile, Scooter worked at a hotel. This meant that he would have access to card information from guests that book through sites like booking.com. I called the manager of the hotel and told him there were reason to believe that one of his employees were trying to commit credit card fraud and that the card's numbers could belong to their guests. Gave him the name of the people who owned the card Scooter tried to pay with, and to no surprise both had stayed at the hotel. Told him it was Scooter, and the manager just exploded in anger. Not 100% sure what he said because he was screaming so loud, but I think Scooter wasn't a normal employee. He worked there through some kind of government training program or something. After talking to the manager, I called both Visa and MasterCard International and told them about Scooter's little business venture. Apparently it's pretty easy to check if there are more cards that have been involved in fraud, where the cards also have been used at Hotel Scooter. With his polished deposit account info, they would also be able to pin it on Scooter if he had been successful in scamming anyone, and sue him for the amount stolen. The police also called me later to get a statement regarding the whole situation, so I know that the manager reported it to the police. Not sure what happened to Scooter, but according to his Facebook profile, he no longer works at the hotel, or anywhere else as far as I can see.